Now, US President Donald Trump has been on a deportation drive since his first days in office. He has halted all asylum processes and has already begun deporting undocumented immigrants. He has also suspended programs dealing with refugee admissions. Let's talk about this aggressive stance then by the US President. Prof. Everisto Banyera, Professor of African Politics at UNISA, joins us online now to unpack this a little bit more. Prof, thank you so much for the time, and good morning to you on this Saturday morning. It's not the first time he's gone on the offensive. The last time out, he was talking about building a wall, and immigration has always been a key factor. Why is this time different?
Good morning, and thank you for having me. The first moment that Trump tried his very hard stance on immigration, I think he was testing the proverbial political waters. What we are seeing with his second term in office is now the actualization of populism in politics. Trump's second term in office is what is called in politics a constitutive moment in history. Trump will create not just profound new ways of doing things, but he will also create new ways of seeing things, a new reality, a new imagination about how to manage irregular human movement across national borders. The ideology, Arabile, of our country, our people, is very exclusionary, and it is always bound to create challenges because human movement is as old as humans themselves. And the bottom line is that populist political parties like the AfD in Germany and like what Donald Trump was promising when he was campaigning cannot win solely by focusing on the economy, but they need to link local problems with migration, and Donald Trump is doing that exactly. And unfortunately, he is doing it very well.
Is this a cause of concern globally then? We're still going to focus on Donald Trump specifically, but has this become a global concern? Because it feels as though protectionism has become the key facet to look out for in the world, as opposed to globalization, which was the whole point here. We're talking about the same president who wanted to do away with birth citizens or people who were born in the United States then being considered United States citizens.
You are correct in that what is happening in the United States of America is not just happening only there. It was all along being slowly built up. We saw it with Brexit, with the resurgence of far-right nationalist parties in Germany, Marine Le Pen in France, and so on and so on. So this is not only an American problem. This is actually a problem that pits the West versus the global South, where generally speaking, people from the global South are being excluded from belonging in the global North. And the cause for that, Arabile, at a global scale is the problem of unequal regional development. And it is coupled and worsened by both man-made and natural disasters. By this, I mean a combination of climate change-induced human movement and human movement that is being caused by the various wars that are happening in Ukraine, in Sudan, in the Middle East, and in some parts of Africa, such as Cabo Delgado in Mozambique, and as recent as in the Eastern DRC. So this is a very bad coming together, a concoction of factors that are making countries more nationalistic, more protectionistic, and building ideological, proverbial, and policy walls around their national borders.
So how concerned and how worried should we be? Are you expecting mass deportations back into South Africa because of the number of perhaps illegal immigrants that might be in the United States especially? Does that create an irregular movement of immigrants globally?
There is a paradox that I must mention here, that let's call it a movement paradox, that what Western liberal democracies do is that they enthusiastically promote the free movement of information, the free movement of capital, the free movement of goods and services, the internet, the stock exchange, and so on and so on. between the global south itself, south to south, between the west itself, west to west, and also between the global west and the global south. Unfortunately and interestingly, the movement of people is something that is prohibited. And we are also guilty here in Africa. We promote the free movement of goods. We've got South African companies that are operating in many parts of Africa, but we do not want those African people to come into our economy. So there is a paradox of movement here. And to get to the point that you raised, whether we are going to see mass deportations into Africa, I don't think we've got a lot of undocumented illegal immigrants that are in the United States, that are of African origin, that are with the attention of President Donald Trump. The majority of the people that Trump is prioritizing right now are from South America. Of course, we will be affected by many other Trump policies, but I think his anti-immigration policies will affect us as South Africa to a less extent, Arabile.
Yeah, but there's still concern, right? And that's still the issue, right? That there is still that lingering concern. Have trade policies completely altered then with the United States? Should we anticipate that that is going to be the thing? I mean, we were already worried about PEPFAR. It was taken away, brought back. Still 90 days is still the question mark at hand here. We're worried about some other trade negotiations as well that continue, whether it be AGOA and the likes. Should we be very concerned at this stage that actually the way we see and the way we confront and the way we deal with the United States has to look different as Africa?
We should be very concerned, Arabile, because what the Trump administration has produced and given us is what we can call certain uncertainty. That uncertainty is now the operative word going forward, whether it is PEPFAR, whether it is the ARVs, whether it is the USID policies, whether it is AGOA, we do not know what the next executive order will produce. But there are lessons for us as Africa. Of course, there are negative lessons. For some, they are now copying or learning from this anti-immigration policy that Trump is having and saying, why don't we have these policies as Morocco, as Egypt, as Nigeria, as South Africa? If Trump is doing it, why isn't President Cyril Ramaphosa also signing these executive orders? And we have a Trump-like administration that is very decisive, very hands-off, and where diplomacy is recalculated and is made raw. The other lesson that is there for us as Africa is that we are over-integrated into the West. Africa is over-integrated into the United States. Just one program, just one arm of the United States administration, the USID, is having profound global implications. So I think the lesson that we have to take from the Trump 2.0 administration is not to rely so much on one partner. Let's try to spread our risk. And for those things that we can do for ourselves, Minister Aaron Motsoaledi mentioned the issue of the ARVs. I think those are a matter of national interest. Let's try to pick those and try to source the funds ourselves instead of relying on other nationals and other nations to protect our national interest. So yes, we are over-integrated and we are getting into an era of political uncertainty, Arabile.
Unwinding all of that, though, Prof, is probably one of the toughest things to be able to do because of that over-reliance that we do have on a lot of elements from the West. How do we fix it? How do we get ourselves, though, a little bit better? Because it's always going to be an economic and a financial situation and dispute, right? That's one. Two, you'll have tribal and traditional aspects to always consider. One, you just take the situation out of the DRC. Just look at the conversations that clearly could not be had coherently between Rwanda and South Africa. So all of those issues are going to be at play. It's one of the issues why we can't get one single currency across Africa, why we can't get one single passport across the African Union itself. All of those factors are perhaps the reasons we hinder our own ability to become a united Africa and do better. Am I correct?
You are very correct in that Africa remains an emergent project because we cannot agree even on the most basic aspect of how can we have a continental passport, how can we have a continental currency, let alone a continental identity where we remain bifurcated along colonial historical projects. Today, we identify ourselves as Francophone Africa, Lusophone Africa, Anglophone Africa, and some are even Arab Africa. We are not yet at that moment where we require to identify ourselves purely as Africans without these surnames that I am Anglophone or I'm a Lusophone Africa. Look at the Pan-African Parliament in Midrand. Voting is still done along those historical lines. So I think what we require in Africa is a very decisive leadership. Unfortunately, like the one that Donald Trump is showing, but albeit on the positive side, on an Africanist perspective, somebody who will come in and say, as Africans, this is the path that we are taking. We are putting our history behind us and we are imagining a new decolonial Africa. We are creating a new political identity for ourselves. Because if these political identities were colonially created, one, they can be destroyed, and two, new political identities can be imagined and formulated and deployed to create a new Africa.
Prof, the very same people that try to then do that are then often called puppets of the West in many ways as well. So, man, it just doesn't end. And we have to just keep trying, I suppose, because to not continue to try ultimately means we make zero progress. You lose all the battles that you actually don't fight. Prof, appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much for joining us here on Newsfeed AM. Professor Everisto Banyera is a professor of African politics at UNISA.